you could.
Is it recording?
Yeah, we're both
good. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Positive.
Okay.
Okay, so hey, welcome to Wildly Curious, episode 4.
Welcome.
It's a beautiful day here in Colorado. It's not a beautiful day here in Colorado. It's actually...
No, that's such a lie.
It's pretty cold.
Although I don't know why the weather is relevant to the podcast. It's not.
That's a fair point. I was supposed to be in Detroit, but I'm not, which is why we might be a couple days late on this podcast. So apologies for that for our 12 followers. And hey, if you're a follower and you like us, just make sure to tell your friends about us. And if you hate us, make sure to tell your friends about us.
Why? If they don't like us, they should just walk away and stop listening to us.
It's the classic rule. Any press is good press.
I don't know about that.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure about that either, now that I say that.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of that.
Well, anyways, hey, one of us had a new experience.
Yeah, I'm actually really tired because of it. It was not the thing to do in the middle of the day, but... Oh,
that's a good point. Why don't you tell people what it is?
I was going to, and then you told me that it was such a good point that I was making. Yes. Well, so I went to one of those float places where you sit in the
pool, is it a
dome?
Pool?
It's like a dome, like a clamshell.
Oh,
very like Little Mermaid.
It's like a mermaid thing.
It's not a mermaid thing.
No. You need to describe it better.
It's like a bathtub that's bigger than you.
Oh, is this one of those sensory deprivation things?
I don't know. That's not what it's called.
Well, it kind of feels like it.
Okay, but that's not what it's called. It's called float.
Oh, okay.
Because you float. So it's like this tank that's full of...
Giant bathtub.
Well, I don't know. It's a clamshell-looking water container.
Okay.
That is large enough to hold at least 10 inches of water. So you might drown. That was in the paperwork I had to fill out. Was acknowledging that...
This is a relaxation thing.
That there was more than 10 inches of water and therefore I could drown.
So it's a relaxation thing where you might die.
Yeah. So either you'll come out feeling better about life or you will come out dead. Those are the two possibilities.
Those are the... I mean, I think there's a third possibility.
I don't know. I mean, either way, you come out salty.
Apparently. It's extra salty.
It's all Epsom salt, but it's 3 or 4 times saltier than the ocean.
Oh.
Yeah. Because you need a lot of salt to float.
Oh, okay. So that helps the floating process.
Yes. And that's why my ears are salty, because I didn't wash the inside of my ears out because I didn't think to wash the inside of my ears out when I showered afterwards.
That's not all that's salty.
No, that's all that's salty.
Okay. So what was it like? Tell us more about your experience.
So you have like your own room and it has the pod. It looks like a pod, really. And it has like a little shower. And so you like go shower off first, get off any like non-natural things like deodorant.
Okay.
You know, like that's the only thing I wear. So that's the only thing I really like intentionally cleaned off. If you had like hairspray or lotion, then like...
So you have to shower beforehand?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they have the shower there for you.
Okay.
And it takes like 8 minutes for the pool to fill up. So you have time to kill. And then, at least at the place I went to, there were lights around the inside rim. And you can pull the lid down as much as you wanted, kind of.
Okay.
So I left it open a little bit just because I hadn't done it before. So I was like...
Scared of the dark?
No, but I didn't know what to expect.
Okay.
And so the light stayed on.
Was the room dark?
Well, I had to turn off the light to the shower.
Okay.
And it automatically turns off, but she was like, sometimes it takes a long time because it's motion sensitive. So here's how I manually turn it off. So I manually turned it off, and then I got in, and then the lights and like a relaxing music plays for 5 minutes, and then you're cut off.
Okay.
And then, so that's like the first 5 minutes of the hour, and then you have...
This sounds fucking terrifying.
It wasn't. But then you have an hour minus 5 minutes minus 50 minutes of floating in the dark. And then the last 5 minutes, the lights come back on and the music comes back on to kind of like welcome you back to the world. And then after that 5 minutes, the drain starts. And that's when you know, like, you're done. And then you have to go shower.
Okay.
And like I could feel partway through that I would have to shower because like my chin went in the water and then it came up and then it was like all dry and tight from the salt.
Oh no.
And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, shower's important.
So did you enjoy it?
It wasn't bad. It took me like the first...
Did you walk out of the building going, what the fuck was that?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I was tired. I was like, I can go to bed right now.
Oh.
So definitely not a thing to do at 1:30 in the afternoon. But
Okay.
no, I don't know. I mean, it took me like 10 or 15 minutes maybe to like acclimate. And I was worried about getting water in my ears.
Okay.
And so once I got over that, then it was like easier to relax.
Mm-hmm.
And I just needed to get over it because I don't know. I don't know why I had such a fear about getting water in my ears, but I did because, I'm just a little crazy and neurotic. So
see, that's what I think. I think if so the goal is to be alone with your thoughts, right? It's like a
here's the thing. There were no thoughts.
Okay. So how can there be no thoughts?
Okay, well, there were thoughts at first.
Okay.
Because, it took a little bit of time to just kind of figure out how to get comfortable.
Okay.
And then I like hurt something on my right side. So it took a really long time to figure out how to get my arm comfortable. Because there just wasn't a comfortable position lying flat in the water.
Do your arms float next to you or they're like armrests or something?
There's no armrests.
Okay.
Your body is 100% floating.
Okay.
So that took a little bit of time to like figure out. So I was aware of that.
Okay.
But kind of like when you get to a massage and you're at that point where you're like, they're doing something and I know that it hurts, but like also you're kind of still like in a different zone.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that where I'm like, oh God, my arm is like really bothering me.
So this is where I'm stuck on this story because you have, and I hope I'm not disclosing too much, but you have all the thoughts.
Yeah, I do.
All the time, all the thoughts.
Yes.
So I can't wrap my head around the fact that I am having no thoughts.
Okay. So aside from thinking about how my body felt, I had one or two like thoughts.
Okay.
Right? Like thoughts. And the first one I was like, oh fuck, I don't want to think about this.
Okay.
Like, damn it. But then I was like, I'm going to embrace it. Like, let's just see what happens. And then, I don't know, somewhere I was like, I'm just going to let it go. And then it went away.
Okay.
I didn't even have to work hard. It just kind of like
so with no
was passing by, like a paper bag rolling down the street in the wind.
Oh, that's very holistic. That's very
because it was a trash thought. It was garbage train of thought that I didn't want to go down.
That's a thing we have in psychology sometimes with meditation is if you have a thought, let it come into your mind, recognize the thought, and then let it go on its way. It sounds like a trip. Are you going to go back?
Well, I didn't finish telling you about all the thoughts I
well,
didn't have.
All right, keep going.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess that's not what this podcast is about.
It's not, but
I don't know. It was an interesting experience.
Do you recommend?
I think so.
That is not a full-throated recommendation.
I don't know because everybody who I talked to beforehand, who hadn't done it, which was pretty much everybody, was like, "Oh, I could never do that. I'd never do that." And
it sounds fucking scary.
But it wasn't. Like once again, the adjustment period is going to vary depending on who you are, and you can touch the sides of the tub. There's like towards the front of the tub, there's like actual metal handles that you could hold on to if you want to.
Okay.
And you don't have to stay laying down the whole time. Like you could sit in the tub.
Okay.
And there were times because I was so worried about my ears getting clogged that like I would come up and I'd let my ears drain and I'd be like, okay, we're good. There's no problems. And then like I'd noodle around for a bit and then I'd go lay down again and like zone out. So I don't know. I mean, it was a different experience. The last 5 minutes before the lights came on, I was like, when are we done?
Okay.
So like the last 5 minutes I was antsy.
Okay.
But I think like, I feel like I need to go back again to experience it knowing
what you're getting into.
Yeah. And knowing like that I can submerge my ears and I'm fine. Knowing that like, I don't have to spend the first 5 minutes wondering where my head goes. Yeah. Like, just, I don't know. It would be different. And I don't know if that hour is still going to feel really long or if I'll be able to be more like in it instead of having to take breaks from it.
See, I just can't wrap my head around not having thoughts. And I'm not an overthinker. I can definitely zone out with the best of them. But like even when like I'm trying, the only thing I can relate it to is maybe like when I'm trying to go to sleep at night, I try to make sure I don't have thoughts. But thoughts still happen. Like thoughts still.
The thoughts I think I had were like noticing, where I like at one point I had an itch, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna scratch it, but I'm just gonna like rub it. And I lifted my hand up out of the water, and I was like, oh, my hand's very heavy. And it was like, I was just not getting over to that itch. Like that's not happening.
Okay.
And then I would like push myself from one side of the tub to the other. And just kind of like float back and forth. So I would think about that, right? Like the time it takes to get my body from like one end of the tub to another end, which again is like still kind of a meditative thing.
Yeah.
So there were thoughts, but they're not like, oh, what am I going to have for dinner? Or I'm so stressed out about this, or let me think about this traumatic thing, or like, oh, I'm fighting with someone about whatever. Like it wasn't the usual thoughts.
Okay. So hopefully, you'll go one more time, kind of finalize what you think, and then you could give a recommendation or not a recommendation for people.
Yeah, because I feel like...
Right now, who would you recommend to go and do this?
I don't know. At one point, the pain that I was having in my right side went away. And I was like, oh, I wonder if Corinne might like something like this, if it like stays that way. And it didn't. Because it's essentially a giant Epsom salt bath.
Yeah.
And so I had that thought of like, oh, it's an Epsom salt bath. Like, of course it would help your muscles. That makes sense. But I'm so far gone that like even a giant Epsom salt bath, I don't think is going to fix my problem overnight. So I had that thought of like, oh, maybe you would for this thing.
Okay.
I don't know. I would say if you're interested, or if you're like, I did it because I am trying to expand my list of ways in which I can cope with life and, you know, work on self-care and have practices that are...
So that's like, it's like contemplative therapy.
Maybe, like something that could separate or relax or, you know, but I don't necessarily have anyone specifically in my life right now that I would be like, oh, you should go do this.
So here's the thing that kind of surprised me becoming a psychologist was learning. So I wasn't about the holistic health, wholeness, wellness things before I went back to school. I thought being a psychologist would be very clinical, very diagnosy and research. And there's certainly that element to it. But about halfway through my training, I realized I was recommending people, hey, have you tried yoga? Have you tried meditation? Have you tried...
I know who I would recommend it for.
Okay.
If you were having a hard time getting to sleep, I would say schedule one of these at like 6 o'clock and plan to go to bed after. Because I was driving home and I was like, man, I could go to bed.
But instead, you've chosen to come here and podcast.
I'm re-engaging with life because it was much lesson learned.
Not in the middle of the day activity.
This is a late afternoon, early evening kind of activity.
God, now my leg hurts. Now you just started thinking about that.
You could go float it out.
All right. So this week we have a topic we kind of wanted to talk about, but you just read something?
Yeah, because we had to stop temporarily because the dogs were barking. Surprise, surprise.
Our dogs, Dracaris and Cusco.
They're very cute, but they're very barky.
Yeah.
And so has any good, what century are we in?
The 21st century.
As any good 21st century human would, I popped on social media and I saw that Jamila Jamil had posted this and I was like, I want to go read this. So I Googled it and apparently Tennessee has come out, their house has passed legislation that allows clerks in like the marriage office.
Yeah, county clerks typically issue marriage licenses.
They are now allowed in the house, from the house, to deny marriage based off of their religious preferences. And it had cited interracial, gay, I forget if there was one more like type of marriage that they said.
Underage.
No,
it's Tennessee.
Not underage.
I'm not knocking Tennessee. I'm just
not underage. And then the other one was an anti-drag bill, which seems to be the hot button case. But I was so, I think, surprised to see that gay marriage was like snuck in there. And the article that I read said that it was expected to pass. Both of those are expected to pass in the Senate.
Which means the governor is also likely to sign them.
Well, and here's the thing. Tennessee Tennessee is already kind of like...
on the edge right now.
Yes. I mean, but everybody is on the edge.
Which surprises me, actually, because I've been through Tennessee before, and man, some of the nicest people I've met live in Tennessee. It's beautiful. Like, it's gorgeous in Tennessee.
So this is what this says from the Human Rights Campaign. They have an article about it, and their legal director has made this statement in this article. And it says, extremist Tennessee lawmakers are unrelenting in their discriminatory attacks on the LGBT plus community. Instead of focusing on issues that Tennesseans actually care about, I don't know, maybe healthcare, maybe education, maybe like crime. You know. So instead of focusing on issues that Tennesseans actually care about, radical politicians, and I keep diverting from the quote. I'm such a bad quote reader. But I like that it's put in terms of radical politicians, and we can talk more about that. But radical politicians are wasting their time using their power to target the LGBTQ community, from same-sex couples to transgender youth to drag artists. These bills are not about protecting children, and they're not about religious freedom. They're about stripping away the basic human rights that LGBTQ plus people. Oh God, my brain's all over the place. I saw this thing on the internet, and someone was like, they had called the LGBT community the LGBTQ. And it's like the best thing in the world.
I'm adopting that.
And so she's like,
I'm stealing that.
She's like, I identify as LGBTQ, and that's how I want to be addressed for moving forward.
That's fantastic.
It's like
I love that.
It's a trending thing, and I'm about it. So as I'm reading this, that came to mind.
So continue.
But they're about stripping away the basic rights that LGBTQ plus people have fought for over decades, forcing LGBTQ people, particularly transgender, non-binary, non-binary people back in the closet, labeling us as dangerous. We urge the Tennessee Senate to reject the discriminatory and hateful bills. And then it goes on to say that the Tennessee House of Representatives continues to be one of the most dangerous legislative chambers in the country for LGBTQ plus people. They've ignored constituents. There's an N in there that's really throwing me off. They've ignored them in their offices, phone calls, and compelling committee testimony. It's time they became the people's house again.
So much there to unpack.
I know, and that's just like...
So let's go back to the first thing. If a county clerk can deny a marriage license because of their religious belief, let's unpack that a little bit.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. This is what I don't understand. I thought that the Supreme Court, somewhere coupled in there with Barack Obama, made it so that gay marriage is federally protected. Didn't that happen in like 2015?
Yes.
So how can Tennessee say no?
So you're talking about the Oberfeld ruling,
yes,
and essentially saying that is a right. Basically, that you cannot deny equal protection of marriage under the law because of someone's sex or gender,
yes.
And that's right. That happened. So here's the thing about that, though. Just to get into the minutia for just a second, and then we're going to get back into this.
Well, there's a lot of things to unpack here.
States are allowed to pass laws that may or may not be constitutional. Okay.
Because that makes sense.
Right, exactly. But that's how the Constitution changes. So what happens is a state will pass a law that they may know is unconstitutional, like denying access to health care for kids. There's no way that passes constitutional muster. I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 articles that's problematic under, most specifically privacy. But then also in enumerated rights, it's not. Anyways, minutia. They pass it knowing it's unconstitutional so that they can get the court case. The court case will go through the system, and now there is such a conservative majority on the Supreme Court that they're likely to overturn
like a political tactic.
It's 100% what it is. I mean, the real political tactic is getting reelected, and they figured out that this energizes people, galvanizes the right wing. We're going after queer people, and you don't like queer people, so elect us.
Right.
That's priority one. Is get elected.
This is, I think, what we were talking about the other day, is that a lot of this discourse and dialogue is a red herring.
Right.
Where
it is.
it's like, hey, we're going to talk about trans people and we're not going to talk about healthcare. We're not going to talk about education. We're not going to talk about crime.
Because they don't have the answers for those.
Right.
And
so
that's really what it is. I was having this conversation yesterday with
me.
With you and one of the guys behind the Queer Eye show. And he so eloquently put it of they have no answers. And when you have no answers, all you can do is attack cultural issues. And all you can do there is you can get people out to galvanize your base. But no, the longer strategy is enough of these laws passed. One of them is going to make it up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court today would not have passed Oberfeld. That would not be a right. So absolutely, they're going to put these through so they can overturn that nationwide. That's going to happen.
We need to get married. Which is horrible. Like, it's so horrible that, when we've had these conversations about getting married over the past, 5 years, it's like 20% because we genuinely want to, and then like 80% because it's like, oh shit, like maybe we should get married now.
Yeah.
And it's not that we wouldn't be talking about this otherwise, like the 20% actually is probably more like 80% because we've expressed like we want to do it, but it just sucks that there's this cloud over it that like makes it not fun and makes it a thing that we have to do.
Yeah. So this is so interesting. You read that about the bill because I kind of felt like I saw this coming. I didn't know that was the case. I didn't know that states were looking to give county clerks permission to deny things based on religious beliefs. But this is what I'm completely fascinated. And it's what I shared with you the other day. Your religion is a choice. Your religious affiliation is a choice. Like, really, your religious affiliation is a lifestyle. And what I mean by that is you can change your religion in a day. You could decide to be Catholic today. You can decide to be Mormon tomorrow. You can decide to be Lutheran the next day. And based upon that choice that you get to make in the moment, you can claim religious discrimination.
Though, my one thought on that is that indoctrination is not a choice.
No. And
that's where, for me, you're arguing. Like, I want to say absolutely yes, but like, we have to realize that
20 years of being indoctrinated as a kid,
But even you don't even need that. Sometimes it's just, they drip feed you.
Yeah. Right?
And all of a sudden you're like a couple years into going to church and it's just like, oh shit, like
we're in this.
We're in deep,
So, but this is where the argument holds up. You can decide tomorrow not to be Catholic anymore. This is the only protected class in America that is entirely based upon a choice. This is the only protected class of, I choose to be religious today, and therefore you can't discriminate against my religion. And so anytime I hear about these religious objections to whatever, or religious liberties, I think to myself, you know what? There are people that fight for the right not to make cakes for LGBT marriages because it goes against their religion. I can't turn them away from my service if they're Christian. I'm sorry, you're Christian. I can't provide you a service. That's not a thing. Even though their thing is a choice versus being queer is not a choice, we know that is ingrained.
Well, but I don't know. I mean, it's just so interesting how what people think is a choice and what people think isn't a choice.
Right. And I get your point of, when I was deep in Mormonism, I thought for sure, there's no choice. I am Mormon. That's what I believe. Well, it's not a choice. But it's 100% a choice, and I know that because I chose to not be.
But also, I have a couple thoughts. Your choice to not be comes with consequences. Your choice to not be Mormon in particular comes with excommunication, comes with you can't ever go to a family member's wedding, comes with you can't be buried with your family, comes with you can't do these special things with your family, comes with you're never going to go to heaven. There's all sorts of consequences to that. But I think really do we need to look at the people who are in the Tennessee House and how much of them are, genuinely faith abiding people, the people who are just deep in it and this is what they believe. And I feel like maybe Amy Barrett, she's on the
Supreme Court.
Yeah. She might be one who genuinely is in it
Yeah, believes it.
Right?
This is
yeah.
For her, it's not faith, it's fact.
Yes,
and therefore
this is
I can
what
be
she
objective fact.
Yes, but are some of these people who are saying these things, are these, very loud, radical was the word the article had used, are they faith-living people, or are they political masterminds?
Yeah, and
because if part of it is, hey, we're gonna, we've already got this gender thing rolling, let's add on gay marriage to it, let's see what happens, we've got a conservative Supreme Court, that's not religious based, that's politics. And
it's also think though, and this is the state of politics, normal people aren't elected to office anymore. And that's because of the primary process. And this is where it gets frustrating. A while ago when they were talking about Trump's impeachment, I remember Michael Moore was on Seth Meyers one night, or another talk show, and he started calling on people in the Senate, and he used this, said people of faith, people of real faith. And he quoted like Mitt Romney as example, as someone who's devout in their faith, and they do it because they believe it and they think it's true. And he said, I want you to rely on those people, who have their own moral compass and they believe in it, and use that. And it was interesting because he was acknowledging in this argument that there are people of real faith, just like you're doing, that these people believe this wholeheartedly. Great. Or not great, that's depending on what side you're on of that. But I do think there are those devout believers. But then I also think that people that are going along. Like, it's really what we wanted to talk about today is this vocal minority is not the majority. And we know this because we live in a fairly conservative area, and people here are generally nice. Like, people here don't really seem to care one way or another about queer things or whatever.
But isn't that also counteracted because of the financial privilege?
It is. It's offset. We live in a place where people are highly educated, and that's a tricky spot for sure. But still, we point out the fact that most people in America don't actually want to harm other people. And we know this because the support for gay marriage in the 90s was something like 20 or 30%, something like that. And then a couple of years ago, Pew did a poll that showed it was like 78, 80%. 80% of America, that includes Republicans, conservatives,
Christians. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe the 20% is Christians. I don't know.
I mean, our country is something like 68% Christian.
Yeah, but how many of the 68 Christian are actually Christian? That's a whole separate...
That's a topic for another day. But the majority of America has no problem with gay marriage. So why are these legislators and people going after it? They're going after it because the people that elect them are the primary voters. And primary voters, I'm sorry, are batshit crazy. On the conservative side, they are batshit crazy.
Primary, like the primary election?
No.
Or primary, like they're the main voters?
No. So primary voters are basically the diehards of political parties. On Republicans, Green Party, Democrat Party. These are people that go to caucuses. These are people that show up at conventions and they cast their votes. And God bless them for loving their country and being involved in politics. I can't fault them that. But these are the people who live and breathe the dogma of each person's respective political party. And so what happens when you have that is the people that win those on the left and right are usually the people that talk to the extremes, because those are the kind of people that show up in the primaries. And then by the time the way our systems work with congressional districts and House districts, it's so fucking gerrymandered that in most states, most counties, most districts, whoever wins the primary is going to go on to win the general election. Like, I know when I was in Utah, 3 out of 4, or I guess I have 5 now, congressional districts are something, they drew them in a way so that Democrats are only in one district and they're a smaller part of that district. And they basically seceded that seat. And they said, okay, Democrats will always win this seat. So whoever wins that primary on the Democratic side becomes the Democrat congressperson from that district. But the other 4, whoever wins the primary, that means they're only Republican on the ticket in the general election, will win the general election. So it is a handful of people, the most extreme people, and this goes on both sides, that end up being elected to office. And that's why we had these these people passing bills and things like that are just purely discriminatory in nature and are not constitutional. But because our Supreme Court is so conservative right now, there's a pretty good chance some of this unconstitutional stuff is going to become constitutional. And that's going to be a real problem.
Well, and it's crazy because, again, like looking at that same article, it says, 3 months into 2023, there's already 400 anti-LGBTQ plus bills.
Yeah.
175 of those are trans specific.
Mm-hmm. And how is that serving America? At the end of the day, how can you actually say this is serving America? Like, there's no positive spin on this. It's purely hate baiting.
But we already figured out that it was a red herring.
Exactly.
That it served a purpose.
It does serve a purpose. It galvanizes the base, gets voters out. But at the same time, that doesn't justify harming people. So the other thing, and we're talking about bills, I keep going through this, and I saw a bit the other day, a comedian was talking, or a stand-up kind of person was talking, and he started talking about public drag shows. Have you ever seen a public drag show, Brittany? Now, you live in Las Vegas. You've seen some things. Did you ever just walk down the street and all of a sudden there was a bunch of drag performers there who were stripping?
No, I mean, I've seen other things.
Yeah.
I've seen some other things.
I'm sure. Don't look down those alleys.
But I've not ever... So they'd actually do well in Vegas.
Right?
They would. If there was ever a place to encounter a public drag show, it's Vegas.
That would be the place. But there are no public drag shows. That's not a thing.
No. It's not like you have like, what is it, like poetry in the park or something? It's not like that where you're going to go to the park.
Flash mob drag show. Like, and even then,
but
not
even then,
drag show.
Here's the thing. What's the show?
Right.
Because like a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of, I think, gray area where they're talking about drag shows, but then they're also talking about being in drag, in air quotes, in public.
Right.
And then what does that look like?
And that's where it gets scary. So when you look at Tennessee's bill or the other bills that are talking about public drag shows, again, red herring, because one, there's no public drag shows. That's not a thing. Much less public drag shows that are adult oriented. Not a thing. But
drag shows do tend to happen more in bars.
Yeah. With wage requirements and ideally, like,
I wouldn't call though, like, story time with a drag queen a show.
Right.
Like literally, if I go read a book to kids at the library, I'm not putting on a show. I'm just reading a book. Trust me, that's,
So this is where it gets scary. The wording in the actual bills, and they're trying to distract you saying it's public drag shows. And I encourage you to actually go read the bills, because the bills say if a man is impersonating a woman or a woman is impersonating a man in public, this person is guilty of a misdemeanor in the first offense and felony in the second offense. Impersonating is an interesting word.
It's a vague.
It is. By no means do I think trans people are impersonating, but a conservative judge, all day long.
Well, there's a gray area in being trans where pre and early transition, there's ambiguity, there's things that don't match up, there's all sorts of stuff that easily can fit into, what was the word you used? Impersonating, right? Because it's like, oh, I identify this way, but I don't pass.
Right, I'm still learning the ins and outs of this.
Right, my hair is not long if I'm trying to be more femme, or, I am transmasculine, but I can't get top surgery and binders hurt because I have a bad back. Right. Like, there's all sorts of things, but it's funny though, because it's all, oh, that makes a difference.
A little bit.
But it's all still only solely focused on men pretending to be women.
Yeah,
And trans women. Nowhere, we don't give a shit about trans men or non-binary people in terms of like any of the legislative stuff that's coming out.
So I think let's talk about that on the next episode, because I read an article today talking about the rise of butch lesbians again, and we'll get to that one. Some people, when I bring up that the verbiage in the bills, they say no. And I say this gives police the right to arrest trans people for simply being in public, and they say no. That's an overreaction. That's not at all what they're going to do. They're not actually trying to attack trans people. But then CPAC happened. And the man who said, at least he's pretending to be a man pretty well. I'm not actually sure. The man who said...
Well, before you say that, going back to your thought about like how police could arrest people and how everyone's saying, no, clearly has never seen like a person of color being arrested for being a person of color.
Oh, yeah.
Like I just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing.
Yes. So go back to... And shit, if you're a trans person of color, you're fucked.
You're fucked.
But go ahead, talk about CPAC.
So... a standing ovation for the man who claimed we need to eradicate America of transgenderism.
Who used the word eradicate.
Eradicate.
And we had this conversation a couple days before where you're like, they are trying to eradicate trans people. And I was like, I don't know that I haven't heard anybody use that word. That's a strong word. Like sometimes you get a little too hot and passionate about topics.
I do.
And like, I maybe come in a little too low because... that's just, those are our personalities, and that's why we're together, probably, is because somewhere in the middle, when you mush us together, we make a very level-headed person. But I was like, no, like, that's, you're a little off the deep end with that. And then I saw that, and I was like, oh, shit. All right, I guess we're all swimming in the deep end. I just didn't know. I'm floating. My deep end has salt.
Yeah. Make no mistake, these people want to eliminate transgender people.
For the sake of...
For the sake of what?
Political gain?
Or even if it's their religious belief, but even then, or some.
Well, I was just wondering, like, was Hitler a religious thing or just a...
Well, that's what's interesting.
Because that's what this is very much so like. And there's so many things saying, like, I don't want to say the Republican Party, because it's the extremists, it's the radicals.
Make no mistake, DeSantis is a fascist.
Yes.
He is an absolute fascist, and that is where the Republican Party is going.
Yeah. But what I was saying was that there's a lot of discourse saying that the Republican extremists, I don't know what word I feel comfortable using yet, but that those individuals are taking notes from the Nazi playbook.
Maybe that's why they're so against history being taught in school. I don't want to get into a whole other thing on this. I think the alt is the alt-righteous, and there's more to that. More to come on that later. But we are seeing the rise in Christian nationalism. They want this to be a Christian state. They want God taught in the schools, and they want you to conform. And if you don't conform, well, now we know they want to eradicate you.
Which is how it's been from the beginning.
I would like to believe it hasn't always been. I would like to believe.
Isn't that what colonialism is founded on? We are white Christians who have these beliefs. You are Native Americans. You do not. Yeah. We're going to murder you.
Yeah.
And then we're going to tell everybody that we had turkey with you.
I think you're absolutely right. I think, and one of the things that comes into play is understanding. I used to not believe America could become a murderous nation. But I'm sure there were Germans in the 1920s and 30s, well, maybe before World War I, 1913, who didn't think Germany could become a murderous nation.
You know what I think?
Tell me.
This is all like just shit.
Yes.
Like, I'm so depressed after having this conversation. Because, and this is why, for me, I have to stay very far, like, arm's length and then some from it, because it's too much. It's too impactful. There's too little that I can do. And I feel like I could spend my whole life dedicated to, like, doing things for marginalized people, and it's never going to be enough to make up for, like, what is happening. Like, I am one person in a neighborhood, in a city, in a state, in a country, in a world, you know, because like the United States is not the only one who's like
On this
fighting
bandwagon.
about gay people
Yeah.
or queer people. And it's just like, shit, like I can't, there's literally nothing that I can do. And anything I do is like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a drop in the bucket. And it's so stressful to have to carry this weight of trying to be a social change because I am part of this community and wanting to help those who are more marginalized within the community and feeling like there is absolutely nothing I can do and then being paralyzed and crushed to death by that reality.
I think that's a great point. And I think that's a great place to kind of maybe end this on a positive note of
Crushed.
Yeah.
Crushed dreams and suffocation.
Here's what I've noticed. The other day I was talking to a trans woman, late 20s, who was kind of at the end of her rope and wasn't suicidal, but was just completely beaten down. Just, you know, trials of life. And I talked with her for a couple minutes, and after the conversation, I could tell, and she verified that, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit better. That's what we can do. On such a small level, you know, we can reach out to people in the community and just say, you know what, I see you. I hear you. I'm going to be here when things get harder. That's what you can do. That's what you can do, is if you can make one queer person's life, you know, 0.1% better for a couple minutes, that's what you can do. That's all that, I'm not going to say that's all that need to happen. I think there'll be people like me that will carry the torch and burn the bridges and do what needs to do to fight the fight. I think there's people more extreme than me that'll actually get out there and
Burn the bridges
and fight the fight.
And I am not one of those people.
And that's okay.
It doesn't feel okay, especially when like
The community you're part of, like that.
like I've cultivated or maybe found opportunity to be a part of a larger queer community
Yeah.
online. And it's hard to see everybody saying we need to be doing this, or to see people who I know, you know, from real life saying, you know, why am I only seeing one person reposting this thing I'm saying about queer people? And to see all of these people who are being so vocal and verbal and having the same expectation, you know, and then there's part of me that's like, well, we have podcasts, and that's at least a place where it's like, you know, contained, where we can like push our voices out and hopefully like make a difference. But the expectation to be involved and to be saying things and to be having conversation with straight cis people is massive.
I think you're right, and I think the truth is this is not a fight that's happening on social media. It
And
is.
it's
but
not.
It's not going to do shit. All the social media in the world isn't going to do shit. Do you think the Christian Nationalists give a shit about social media? No.
Well, and looking-
they give a shit about getting the right people elected to office, to elect the right judges, to take over America and make it a fascist state.
Well, and I think that's where, like, I know that my social media is largely people I know.
And it's all echo chamber
And
stuff.
it's people who, you know, with the exception of a couple of outliers who I know are decent people and who are not, even though they're maybe Republicans, they're not the hate mongering type. They're not the let's support this bill type.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm posting things for the sake of showing other people that I am posting things, which it's hard because, number one, I don't always feel visibly queer enough. So when I, as non-visibly queer person, am not posting things, now I'm really feeling like I'm the problem.
Yeah, and I think anytime you're in a group that makes you think you're the problem for not doing enough,
Well, but isn't it just
fighting the wrong battle?
Am I just the problem because I think that I am the problem and that's just who I am? Because let's be honest, I can make myself be the problem of a lot of things. World War I, somehow I started that.
Okay.
I'm the problem.
Nothing to do with Franz Ferdinand.
No.
The point is, small personal things. Get off social media. Talk to actual queer people. Go volunteer somewhere. Serve people. Surround yourself with people that are different than you and learn and listen. Social media, much like the news stations of today, are just echo boxes, and they're about ratings. They're about clicks. They're about advertising. Social media companies will feed you things that'll know that you respond to, and so that they can make money. That's all that is. So maybe that's why we have a podcast, and I think that's why I'm doing this, is hopefully that one person listens to it, one person stumbles upon it, and I make their day maybe 0.1% a bit better. And that's all we can really do. And that's okay. So with that, that's the end of this episode. Apparently next week, we're going to be talking, in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about the rise of butch lesbians.
Unless we come up with something different.
Unless there's another bill out there that's in the news or the not news. Anyways, thanks for listening. Please tell your friends about us. Please subscribe. Please do whatever you need to do. We really enjoy doing this and putting us out there, and this is something we want to do more of. Also, if you're interested in being a guest on the show, go ahead and reach out to us. Our information's on our website. Just
unless you're a Christian nationalist.
Oh, Christian nationalist, please.
Maybe we don't.
Please reach out to. Oh God, please.
Okay, you can do that episode alone. I'm gonna go on vacation when you do that episode.
Oh, that's gonna be fun.
Okay, yeah, you have fun with that.
All right, but yeah. Anyways, reach out to us. We'd love to have you on and hear your opinion, especially if it's different than our own. And bye-bye.